furies of language and thought, which moves faster than the wind, he has tamed and made rational. The miracle of man's speech is odd in its own way, because it's a slight departure from the sense and reality that we've had in the play up till then. It's one.
Yeah, just a little feedback of a more general nature on the discussion boards. In general, the answers/responses, which are the things that are due every Tuesday by 5 p.m., earning 4s are going to be the ones that are thoughtful as opposed to knee-jerk. You know, they suggest some sort of meditation on the question and not just kind of rapid fire kind of reaction to get the assignment done. They will also be argumentative. They'll argue something. They'll make claims. They'll be detailed. They'll offer evidence in support of their claims, and they'll be well documented in the sense that they'll quote, right, when they possibly can. And they'll certainly, I mean, this is part of being detailed and offering that evidence in support of the claims that you make, is to quote when you can, quote from the text, the literary text. Don't quote too much, don't quote more than you can handle in your explanatory and analytical moments, right? Well, many of you earned 4s this week, okay? Lots of 4s this week, which just makes me happy, right? Others earned 3s. Don't feel that, oh, I'm a failure, I got a 3. No, you just got 3 this week, right? And you can, you have more to go on, I think, as time goes on here, and we have examples that are probably pretty obvious. Some items that, that are there that you look at and you say, hey, that's good. I'm going to do something more like that next time. Okay? So learn from each other. Let me mention there were very few who participated. There's some who didn't participate, but there are very few who did participate who received fewer than 3 points. Okay? So my most general bit of advice is that middle sentence. 3 words, keep it up, right? Now, read the comments. With regard to the comments due every Thursday by 5 p.m., it's now 1:30 in the afternoon on Thursday, okay? And what I've noticed is that most people have already offered comments, so I don't know, I might actually change the timing for the second part of the discussion boards. I may actually change that to noon on Thursday. I was thinking about making it midnight on Wednesday. I may end up querying you guys about that because I want it to be something that works in your schedules. And I can imagine that a lot of professors are hitting you with things due early in the week because everybody likes to have the end of the week open to do, all the professors, they like to have the end of the week open to do their research, right? And I don't want to, I want to be mindful of that. Okay, so let's make sure we're not just kind of front loading everything to a kind of degree that it collapses, your early weeks. So we'll see. Maybe we'll keep it at Thursday by 5. But I like to have you will, we'll get into this routine. We're already in the routine, right? It's just, I guess it's not a routine yet because it hasn't happened a second time. But I'm going to be giving you a video like this every week, and it's going to be directed towards the discussion boards and whatever issues might arise that maybe we didn't get to on the discussion boards or whatnot. It would be nice to have the comments done by you before I actually make up this video. Now, that's not going to happen this week. It may not happen going forward, and that's okay. It's not the end of the world if it works that way. If I don't respond to your comments, there's still 3 or 4 hours left after I've made up the video, which is directed towards, the discussion boards, but there's still a little overlap there. You can always bring it up the following week, right? So just there's that. Now there's also this other thing. Just what do you do for the, for the comments as opposed to the answers responses? The answers responses due every Tuesday at 5. The comments due every Thursday at 5. Okay. Do exactly what you do. You see what I'm writing down here is a bit of evidence or a bit of direction. Okay. Try to do exactly what you do on the answers responses, just at less length. And of course, what you're doing is directed at the comments, or rather the answer, or answer/response of one of your fellow students, right? As opposed to my question, you're actually commenting on an answer to my question. Okay, and that's the difference. That doesn't mean you don't go back to the book, right? Go back to the book, quote in support of your claim. Don't stick with the evidence. You might want to quote evidence. I use the word against. That sounds more hostile than, in helpful constructive engagement. How about that? With your fellow students, right? You're commenting on a fellow student's answer response and you're quoting in support as a means of, in fact, being even more helpful, right? By bringing some new evidence into the discussion that maybe is missed by your fellow student who has offered an answer and a response. So what does this mean? Well, argue, quote, and analyze even as you address one another's arguments. I mean, that's the upshot, right? I noticed that some offered several comments, by the way, and some of the extra comments beyond the first comment were kind of thin, right? It was like a one-sentence comment that some of you made, which was really pretty appreciative. Hey, that is fabulous. There's no problem with that. I like that, and it shows you're all reading each other. You got excited. You liked what you heard, what you read, and you'd already offered another official kind of comment, right? That was argumentative. And so by no means am I saying only offer one comment and it better be argumentative. What I'm saying is do exactly what you did this week, where there was this spontaneous conversation going on. It was just really wonderful. So we're going to see in the next plate here, where I'm going to kind of celebrate what I saw as just a lot of engagement you had, not just with the text, but with each other, okay? So that's absolutely fabulous, and the last thing I want to do is discourage that. I mean, this is our discussion, right? We're having discussions, and they have to be done on a discussion board, online. So I don't want to shut that down. Just make sure, there's just this minimal rule, that at least one of the comments that you write, as I said a moment ago, looks a little bit like an answer response, but it's just not a full paragraph. It's more like about 3 sentences or so. And it can, by the way, I'm aware of this, that sometimes you're just so excited about what somebody said and it prompts something from you and it ends up looking a lot like a answer/response. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be just 3 sentences, but I wanted this to be manageable given your workload, because we're going to have other stuff due here before too long. That's going to maybe make it a little less like this week we just went through. Okay, we're going to have certain weeks like this week where it's pretty much just reading the stuff and then you sit down and do the discussion questions, right? But we're going to have weeks where you can have something else do, right? Like the squib. And I'm still putting together I've got to put together, but there are a couple little things I still want to decide when I want to ask them of you. It has to do with the schedule, okay? And what's going to be happening in November, for example, with respect to the library. So I don't quite want to hand out the schedule or post the schedule yet. But you can have little things due, as you know, at certain dates. And you will find out about that soon. I mean, you need to know for example, when your squib is due, right? You need to know that, and very soon, so you will find out. Anyway, there it is. There's the general feedback, and I'm going to give you some more specific feedback on one particular discussion board question or item and your fabulous answers/responses. That's the next plate. Number 2, then, your discussion board mini essays. I'll talk in detail about one of them, your answers/responses to 200 Pre-Mod 1 Q1, which was a very popular item on this particular discussion board. You'll remember that item. The Norton editors write, quote, rather than offering us neat or comforting solutions and answers, literature enables us to experience difficult situations and human conundrums in all their complexity and to look at them from various points of view. Having chosen either Antigone or Trifles as your exemplary work of literature, distinguish and describe the difficult situation or human conundrum that it presents in all its complexity, and name the various points of view that it makes us adopt. Another way of putting much the same question, what is your chosen play's chief issue? And what positions on that issue does it prompt us to explore? You might also try to say whether the play tries to resolve its issue, to solve the problem that it itself poses, and what that solution is. But in any case, be sure to quote, to get into plot detail, to analyze, and to argue. And I think we had a lot of that in your responses. We had a lot of quoting, we had a lot of plot detail, analysis, and argument. There can always be more, of course, but I was fairly well pleased with what I saw. So what I'd like to do is just sort of work through the way I saw the conversation proceeding. John A., to distinguish him from John N., this is John O'Bear, gets the ball rolling. Quote, the main theme of the story is blind loyalty, what Maria calls stubbornness, though she also points to fear. As John N. concurs, for whatever reason, quote, each character in Antigone is stuck in his or her own way. which points to a general failure of empathy. As John A. continues, the difficult situation, quoting the Norton editors, in the story is shown in various situations, such as Crayon and his loyalty to law and order, his son Haman, who neglects his father's ruling, and the damaging effects of that, and the result of breaking the law by Antigone and Ismene, by realistically grave robbing. In effect, John is saying that Antigone's main theme points to the premise of the humanities at large. Life is made up of difficult situations, human conundrums such as we find in Antigone, and Antigone is the more exemplary as a humanities text to the large degree that it does not settle for easy answers to these riddles and complexities, neat or comforting solutions, but indeed explores possible positions on or reactions to them. Now, as Julia says, concurring, quote, the play does not necessarily try to resolve these issues. It just shows the consequences that each person faces with their individual situation regarding rules and order. Note how the issue Julia finds at the center of the play is a little different from what John A. finds. Rules and order versus blind loyalty to one's own interests. Like Montserrat's Crayon, whose, quote, loyalty was to law and order and to state. Her Crayon, Julia's Crayon, emerges as perhaps a less objectionable person, in that he is not so much selfish, wishing to rule, to master, as rule-bound. Someone who respects is mastered by what we now call the rule of law. As Amira agrees, Crayon is conscientious in a way. Now, this is not to say he's not also arrogant and stubborn. He certainly is. And let me advise in passing that you note how Maria and John N. and several others whose names I could mention work through the plot thoroughly, which I would call evidence itself of nice evidentiary probity. We want all the nice evidentiary probity that we can get. In other words, a lot of attention to evidence, a lot of quotation, a lot of analysis of it. I also appreciate an explanation. I also appreciate the former's attention to Ismene, a character that is often overlooked in critical discussions of Antigone. Though not here by you guys, by John A. or by Gabriel, or Gabrielle, who argues Ismene proves loyal to her sister, or by Audra, Ismene is a rule bender, which I thought was a nice distinction. Not a rule breaker, but a rule bender. Of course, many will find it hard to sympathize with Crayon, leaving Ismene behind for the moment, because he is so imperious, so arrogant, right? So stubborn, so, well, selfish, self-regarding, self-important. He is all these things. Mike speaks, or Mick, of his abuse of power, and Brenton concurs, as does Joseph, who does some exemplary quoting in support of the claim. But does not he, too, face a human conundrum? He, Crayon, how to discourage rebels against the state, such as was Antigone's brother, without you, who is, the body of Antigone's brother is, of course, the body that is the treatment of which is the occasion for the play. Without taking such harsh measures, how do you discourage rebels without taking such harsh measures that, ironically, you destroy or disable it, the state, right? The plot can remind you, I don't know if you've seen The Godfather Part 2, in which Michael Corleone destroys his family in order to save it. It reminded me of, I think there was a lot of resonance between these two plots in that respect. Brandy writes, quote, these characters each have strong beliefs, morals, and they stick to them till the end. Now, she too finds stubbornness, a degree of blindness, but also belief in morality, right? Each character, even Crayon, is a creature of belief, a captive of a certain moral code. Even Ismene, who ends up caring less about her own skin. At first, she cares mostly about her own skin, but eventually more about her sisterly bond with Antigone than about herself. As Dulce argues, Crayon is possessed by a false ideal of his own infallibility as head of state. But crucially, it is an ideal that he is possessed by. Nonetheless, Gabrielle, he is an exponent of, quote, the laws of men in conflict with religious law, the laws of God. Again, to recognize something heroic and admirable, or at least worthy and compelling, even in a Crayon or an Ismene, is to see Antigone as all the more exemplary of the sort of work that, according to the Norton and Edmondson in his essay, the humanities bring to the table. Note how Montserrat speaks of the stubbornness noted by others, but calls it loyalty. Lindsay also writes of how loyal are the characters, especially Antigone, Chiron concurs. She finds it not particularly blind, but to a degree admirable and unavoidable. You can't just wake up, for all your blind loyalty, call it blind, but you can't just see the light. You can't just open your eyes. It seems to require something different, something other to solve this problem. Maybe the problem is insoluble, especially to the degree that your blindness is mixed up in love. Haman, for example, suffers a conflict of such loyalties, love for his father versus love for his beloved. The problems seem extremely difficult of solution, do they not? Some will feel that Antigone and the humanities in general leave us at sea without clear direction. I want to conclude by saying, and I think I'm compelled to such a conclusion by you in many ways, such is the cost of so much fairness to competing claims and claimants. So much questioning is as opposed to definite answering. Is that the cost? Do the humanities have a cost? Right, is the question, for all their value. About Antigone, at least, Mack disagrees. It provides a bit of wisdom to have and to hold. It moves us beyond questioning. Those who do not think before they act will suffer the consequences is, in a sense, the moral of the story. Nolan calls attention to the theme, power corrupts. You know, the correlative, absolute power corrupts absolutely, rendering us unable to hear, quote, the voice of reason. Is this a cautionary tale about power, okay, and about rashness? What do you think? Do we, when all is said, do we walk away from Antigone well enlightened? I mean, according to Edmondson and according to the Nortons, you know, you're quickened, your mind is quickened to face in all their complexity the human situation. Whether you're really enlightened, okay, about any particular or to some particular response, some specific and concrete response in the world that you can make when faced with these situations. The humanities do not give us that. What they do give us, according to the Norton and according to Edmondson, they enlighten us to that complexity and to all the good reasons that you might have to take one position or the other. But they leave us, well, let me give Katrina the final word. Are we, as Katrina claims in response to question 2, just led to, just left with questions about things, questioning things such as loyalty, laws, and religion? These are big things. Now, typically my comments on your discussion board contributions will be more selective. They will need to be, but do not feel slighted if your contribution in some particular week is not mentioned. I mean, this week I made sure to mention everyone's contribution. It's the first week, but often I will be noting and quoting answers and responses and comments, not because I regard them as sounder than other answers, responses, comments, but because they serve some particular point that I feel needs making. 200 Pre-Mod 1Q1, folks who discuss trifles instead of Antigone, had similar things to say about it and how it exemplifies what the Norton editors of Edmondson think distinguishes humanities texts. I'll quote just Denise and Emily, since you did not write about Antigone and thus are not mentioned in the previous play. Emily writes, the play Trifles does try to resolve its issue by finding evidence in order to figure out who murdered John, but at the same time the play kind of ends like on a cliffhanger almost. Emily is talking about the plotter story, but she may as well be discussing the theme. Despite the cliffhanger, will the murderer be exposed, discovered, the play, quote, prompts us to explore the fact that women can do anything that men can do, and sometimes even better. It might remind you of the old song, anything you can do, I can do better. Let's call the whole thing off. I think that's how it goes. As Denise concurs, quote, the men fail to see what the women have seen. The women seem to be just simply more perceptive than the men, and less clouded, their vision less clouded by this presumption that seems associated with male prerogative. The play thus has a social and political mission, does it not? It affirms something, a certain fact thereunto. As Denise says, from the perspective of the women, there is justice. So this question emerges, does the quality of the play, of this play, Trifles, render it less exemplary as a work of the humanities, less exemplary than is Antigone, than we have found Antigone to be? Are works of art less worthy? Here's the larger question. Are they less worthy, at least from a humanities perspective, to the extent that they try to move us beyond questioning to see and affirm certain things of, say, political consequence? Well, this question has cropped up at the conclusion of both of these discussions, or both of my attempts to discuss your discussions. It's a good question. This is a good question, and it's one that's going to stick around. But hey, I know you're wondering, how does that old Victorian Matthew Arnold fit in? How does he fit in with these more contemporary accounts offered by Edmondson on the one hand and the Norton editors on the other, these contemporary accounts of the value of the humanities? Why study the humanities? Their answers, how are their answers alike? How are they different from Victorian answers as provided by Matthew Arnold? Is a question that can keep you up at night, right? But it's going to have to wait a week because this video has gone on long enough.
Aquí saiu, lugares para video fazer, viva do brother false, e false poder. Odisseas, Almeias Léfaro, Vivier Mireille Ormolusa, Tom Lefkaspi, as voz Tenefada, Foda da Massagia, Filha